Hello and welcome to our weekly IG Live. Today we are going to be talking about the benefits of reading aloud to children. We're going to be talking to the woman behind Storytime with Ms. Hill. So she is going to be joining us, and she actually has her master's where she wrote exactly about the benefits of reading aloud to make sure that the books that she is sharing with children on her channel are diverse and from diverse creators. So we'll hear all about that. Hello.
Hello. Thanks
So,
for having
so
me.
good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
This is my first ever live, so I'm very excited. And what better way to share my love for books and literacy and education than on this wonderful channel? So I really appreciate you inviting me.
Well, we are honored that we are the channel you chose to do your first IG live. I was so excited when I heard that. And so let's go ahead and let's jump in, and
Let's
maybe you
jump
can
in.
introduce yourself to the people that don't know you and tell us all about because people might know you from Instagram, but you also have the YouTube channel. So why don't you give people an overview?
Yes, yes. So, hello everyone. My name is Mariela Hill, and I have my master's in elementary education. I taught first grade and early childhood ed for 6 years before I transferred into another role, being a CDA PD specialist for the Council of Academic Recognition. And so now I love helping new teachers in their classrooms, observing and giving feedback. And so it's been a really great transition. And yes, I'm also an entrepreneur and an actress. So I really enjoy kind of being a multi-hyphenate in a sense. I have a Storytime channel called Storytime with Miss Hill, where I share books and a song about celebrating differences. And in every episode, I have a random act of kindness segment where I introduce a random act of kindness idea that you can do at home with your family, in your community, at your school. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Well, so tell us about, well, let's back up a little bit now that we have kind of the overview. I know you did your master's thesis on the benefits of reading aloud to kids. Why did you choose that as your topic? Why is that something you're so passionate about?
Growing up, I really enjoyed bedtime stories with my mom. We read together every night and cuddled, and it was our way of bonding. My mother is also an educator, and so she really made sure to choose books that were based on my interests. I grew up on a farm, so I love animals. So we read all of the Misty of Chincoteague Island books, that whole series. Really loved that. So yeah, books that were based on goals, aspirations, and it was really our way of bonding, even when we weren't cuddling in bed, doing our story time. We would talk about the chapters and the characters and what they were going through. So we were always talking about books and literacy. And growing up through early elementary school, my favorite part of the day was story time. And then when I was in middle school and high school, I had a English teacher, Mrs. Govea, and she would start out each class reading from a chapter book. And at the time I was thinking, like, we're too cool for this. We're too old for story time. But I really enjoyed it. I ended up really enjoying it. And that was also my favorite part of that class. So story time is really beneficial, not only for children, but for adults too. Adults listen to podcasts, which is, in a sense, stories and story time. And, I just look back on those days fondly. And yeah, that's why I love stories and literacy.
I'm so glad you mentioned about older children and even adults. I hadn't thought about the podcast, but that's so true. But I know for my own family, my oldest is 13, and we still do read. I mean, we kind of do them as a group, and I think a lot of people mostly associate it with little kids.
Yeah.
They really think about, once kids can read independently, they don't think about continuing that. But I find that we tend to read books that maybe he wouldn't pick up on his own. And plus, like you said, it's just nice bonding time, and then it gives us something to kind of have a conversation about because we're reading these books together, so we have the kind of that shared frame of reference. So what are some of the benefits? What did you find out in your study?
Yeah, so there's so many benefits. You can look at it from an educational standpoint where teachers use story time and stories to introduce new genres. If you're doing a book study, you can introduce your favorite books by various authors. You can demonstrate the proper ways to read, left to right, line by line, holding the book properly, so the proper mechanics of reading. Read alouds can show a reader how to use their voice to create different characters. So it's a little bit of acting in a sense of each character has their own different distinct voice or cadence. They can work on fluency. Fluency, for those who don't know, is reading the way that you would talk, like flowing water. You're not reading choppily at every sentence. It sounds choppy. Fluency is reading how we talk. You increase vocabulary with story time, especially for non-readers or ELL learners. They're listening, they're picking up the words, so that's really great for story time. And reading books, you can use them as conversation starters. The possibilities and reasons why educators choose read alouds in a group is endless.
I love that. There really are so many benefits. And I just want to pick up on one that you mentioned was about the English learners. So I know that that was kind of your situation also. You learned English as a second language. What role did reading books play in kind of helping you with the transition? And then just as a follow-up, I know some moms who they themselves are from somewhere else and English is not their first language. And they always wonder, should they try and read the books in English? Is it okay for them to read books in their native language? Is that still helping kids with language acquisition and so on?
Yeah, I know I can speak from experience. Coming from Ecuador and learning to speak English was hard for me, but when I listened to stories, it was as if my daily woes and struggles with communicating with others vanished as I was transported into the books. So it was also had like a calming effect. And children are like sponges, hearing somebody read aloud increases our fluency and expands our vocabulary. If you don't know a word, you can use context clues from what you hear in the sentences or the chapter. And then if you really don't know, you can stop and ask questions. You can ask your teacher or a family member to explain the definition of a word. And listening to read alouds was also, like I said, calming for me, because especially at the beginning, it was kind of stressful all day to try to figure out what people were saying to me. So read aloud time was a really great time for me to relax and listen to a book, be able to look at the pictures, pick up context clues. For people who are wondering about whether or not to read in their native language, I say do both, because children are picking up words in their own language that maybe they weren't familiar with. And they're also picking up words in English and being able to hear how a word is pronounced. The diction, also looking at the person who is reading and how their lips are moving, how their face is moving, how wide their lips are opening up versus maybe in their native tongue they don't open their mouth as much. So everything helps.
I like that balance so that you can do both and kind of still be exposing them to both languages. And tell us what led you to, so you have this background, you're a teacher, you have to have your master's study in benefits of reading aloud. What led you then to start a YouTube channel?
It was actually my girlfriend from college who has a younger child, and this was during the pandemic. She said to me, while I'm washing dishes or doing chores around the house, especially preparing dinner. I want my little girl to be entertained, but educationally. So I went on YouTube and was looking for story time channels, and they're African American, and she was looking for hosts that were of a different ethnicity. And she found that the majority of story time channels on YouTube were by Caucasian hosts. And so she said, with your acting background, and I've done a lot of hosting, and I'm also a hand model, she was like, all those things combined, I would rather listen to your voice, while I'm doing household chores, and knowing that my daughter is being entertained, but also has that element of education. So she's the one that planted the seed, and she said, you really should think about doing it. And at the time, I was looking for a way to give back to the community, share my love for books, because that was something that I do miss, that I really enjoyed when I was a classroom teacher. I really, really enjoyed selecting books for Read Aloud. And so I really thought a long time about it, did some research on it, and I decided to go for it. So that's how Storytime with Miss Hill came about.
I love it. It does seem that you were just made for that kind of a platform with your background in literacy and education, and then of course like the acting skills, hand model even. I didn't realize that one. It's just so perfect. And like you said, you did a lot of research. I mean, you were very thoughtful about how to do it. And I know one of the things that you were very thoughtful about was about what books you choose, and about, like you mentioned before, about making sure kids are kindness and celebrating differences. Why was that so important to you? And how do you find the books that you're going to share?
Especially when I was teaching first grade, it's such a great age, but it's also the age where kids start to compare themselves to others and really see and be verbal about it. And so I had some issues with students bullying other students about tying their shoes, or being from another country, and their food was different from other people's food. So I found stories that talked about those differences and celebrating differences. Yes, Kim may eat kimchi and it's different from what you're used to eating, but let's read the story about this cat and what she packs for what her mother packs her for lunch. And so it's a really great social story about people who are different from you. And so I really wanted to bring that aspect of being thoughtful about differences and celebrating them, especially now. I think there's so many things and topics that stories can be great conversation starters for, whether it be about different foods, different ethnicities. Your skin looks different than mine. Jimmy has two dads. Sam, is in a wheelchair. Talking about those things is easier when you have a story that you can read that broaches those topics. And then after we've read it, we can discuss it as a family or as a classroom about, it's okay to ask questions. Why Tommy is in a wheelchair and I'm not. Let's talk about it. So stories are really great for that. And so I wanted my channel to be centered around celebrating people differences, and also from authors who are diverse and unique, and illustrators as well.
Yeah, and I love that this came out of your real firsthand experience, that this is really what, there are a lot of people talking about whether kids should be reading diverse books, and here you have this firsthand experience from the classroom, in the trenches, so to speak, about why it's so important, especially at that age, for kids to read these kind of books. And we appreciate what you're doing. How do you go about, what do you look for in a good book, a diverse book, or a book that you want to share on the channel?
I look at a couple things. I look at, first of all, it's easier to approach self-published authors. So I'm a part of several Facebook groups that are for self-published authors. Um, and then usually they're posting about, I just published my book, this is what it's about, these are some of the photos. So I look at the synopsis of what their book is about, and if it aligns with celebrating differences, overcoming adversity, um, uh, self-affirmations, self-daily affirmations is another thing that I look for. Positive stories, but also social stories that you can walk away learning something from. Those are kind of my criteria for looking for these books and then contacting the authors. So it's been a really great journey, and there's some other booktubers that I've also had some help from. Storyteller K has helped me out a lot, giving me some insight. She started her channel at the beginning of 2020, so she shared with me kind of her tips and advice, as well as Butterfly Garden Preschool. Gisa has also helped me a lot. So I did a lot of research and asked other booktubers what's worked for them, and kind of taken away from that as well. So I do have to give them a shout out for helping me.
That's wonderful. Do you feel like since you've been in the space, have you seen the landscape change? You've talked about how a lot of the story time YouTube channels are really more geared towards, like, they're a lot of times run by white people. Do you
Yeah.
see more diversity in this space in terms of the books that are being shared or the people who are doing the sharing?
Absolutely. I feel like I'm discovering new booktubers every day, and there are more and more diversity that I've seen, and also men doing it as well, which I think is wonderful. When I was in the classroom, I always tried to have this initiative of getting more men into the classroom, more dads for read aloud, guest read aloud uh, guests. So yeah, I think it's really great. If people want to, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, but if you want to get some recommendations, I can certainly send you some recommendations for other great storytime channels run by hosts of all different walks of life.
And how do you recommend, say, for a parent or an educator, what is the best way they can really take advantage of a channel like yours? Because it's such a great resource. Like you said, I know a lot of us have that time when you need your child to be entertained, but you're really feeling kind of guilty about them being on screens, and having them, watch a channel like yours is really wonderful. Do you have any recommendations about how to use it, or maybe if it can be used in the classroom?
Absolutely, absolutely. If I was a parent, I would go to the About Me. I think it's About Me, and you read the channel's description, because there the host gives you a synopsis of what exactly their channel is going to be about and what you to expect as a viewer. And down below, there's also links that they provide. And I know a lot of Storytime hosts, myself included, and I know Storyteller K, Gisa from Butterfly Garden Preschool, we all are offering educational resources that can correspond with the different books that we're reading. For me, I have a whole kind of hands-on learning activities that you can do for the random acts of kindness, which I'm happy to give away. And so long story short, read the synopsis, because a lot of us are educators, and we have free resources that parents can do with their children at home, hands-on activities, worksheets, also things that you can do outside of the house together as a family. So definitely take advantage. We also all have our emails up there. So if there's something you see that you want to see more of, or you're interested in getting more information, or you want the lesson plans that we have, email us. And I know I'm happy to give away my resources to parents.
What a wonderful resource to know that this is out there, and it pairs, like you said, it pairs so well with the books that you're reading, and also I would assume that if there's an author that thinks that maybe they'd like to have their book featured on your channel, they can just email you if they're, because we have a lot of authors and potential authors that watch this show.
Yes, yes. I I welcome it. DM me or email me. I am happy to highlight your wonderful book on my channel.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Just to wrap up, do you want to give us like a little preview of anything you're working on now, or what's the future for Storytime with Miss Hill? I know you
Yeah.
just started this the Instagram channel for this. You had your previous one, and so this is kind of new.
Yes, yes. For a long time, like I said, when I reached out to the other booktubers, right away their top recommendation was start a Instagram specifically for your story time, and I didn't listen, and I should have. So yes, I just started this channel, this Instagram page, and I'm very excited about that. I also have teacher resources available on Teachers Pay Teachers, which is a website where you can get tons of free resources and also pay for resources to use in your classroom or at home. I know a lot of homeschool programs go on Teachers Pay Teachers. I also have my website where I have things offered and available, marielahill.com. And you can just go to my store or email me. I love giving away free resources. I have a lot of freebies, a lot of ideas and entire lesson plans and lessons that correspond with the random acts of kindness. And looking forward, I am in the process of writing a new song because at the end of every episode, I have my Celebrating Differences song, but I am in the process of writing a new song. So that's something to look forward to in the future.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing the new song and all that you're working on, and we appreciate what you do. So thanks for coming on here today.
Thanks for having me. This was wonderful. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. If you joined us late, this will be up on the Instagram in just a few minutes, and I'll have it up on our YouTube channel later today. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for joining.